Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here at your magnificent university. I want to thank you, Helen and Linda, if I may, for the invitation. Thank you all for coming, and congratulations on a year of dealing with really important questions. It's great to see that you've had debates, you're going places, and you seem even to know where you're going. Now it remains for you to get there. Easier said than done, but I'm confident that you will do it. So it's a great pleasure for me to be here. Maybe I'm speaking to the choir. I don't know. I imagine you're all book people. We all love books. We all are concerned about digitization. But I think there is almost a case of collective false consciousness about the digital world, the very opposition you mentioned. That people seem to think that it's either the analog or the digital, that they occupy opposite and opposed places on some kind of technological spectrum. You hear a lot of loose talk about the death of the book and the obsolescence of libraries. But of course, books and libraries are more important than ever in the digital environment, and I'm convinced that their importance will increase as we design the digital future, if only we can get that future right. And this if is not, a lot is hanging on it. It's not at all self-evident. So I would like to develop the argument to pursue the if by taking a quick look backwards into the history of libraries and then forward into plans and the actual execution of plans to create a new kind of library, the Digital Public Library of America. Now, the historical importance of libraries may seem obvious. Take a tour of Trinity College, and you will see the library is located at the very heart of the campus. Take a tour of virtually any campus in the United States, you see the same thing. The library stands at the center of the campus, and it occupies a corresponding place at the heart of the university's intellectual life. It pumps intellectual energy into every sector of the university, including laboratories where scientists download data and electronic articles without knowing that they come through the library at a very great cost. At Harvard, the university actually owes its name to its library, a collection of 400 books left to a tiny academy without much of a name in the year 1638, left by one John Harvard. So overnight, this little academy with just a handful of students had the largest library in North America, 400 books. They were so overwhelmed that they changed its name and it became Harvard. So since then, the college, the university, the collection of schools has grown up around that original core of learning. And today, 378 years and 20 million volumes later, we recognize that the university's greatness derived above all from the intellectual riches built up generation after generation and stored in the largest university library system in the world, actually 73 libraries. But I don't mean to indulge in institutional bragging. It's a danger in the world of libraries. One librarian meets another and says, how many incunabula do you have? And another says, well, how many e-books do you have? And around it goes. Instead of institutional bragging, I would like to ask a question. Shouldn't Harvard's library and the other research libraries be considered as a national and even as an international asset? Shouldn't their intellectual wealth be shared? Now, for most of history, that wealth was, of course, restricted to a very tiny elite. And contrary to common belief, the history of libraries does not follow some wonderful trajectory getting better and better. No, it has ups and downs. And I would like to remind you of some of the downs, not as a kind of wail or lamentation, but as a kind of warning, because things could get worse rather than better as we face really important choices for the future. From what little we know about the ancient library of Alexandria, it functioned primarily to store texts, not to make them available to readers. It's true, we think it admitted a few scholars, but its main purpose probably was to glorify the Ptolemaic dynasty. The same principle applied to the Chinese attempt to create a library that would contain all the books in the world, in the Chinese world, of course. The Qing Emperor, Qianlong, set out to do that by confiscating books from his subjects on a gigantic scale from 1772 to 1778. He kept everything that glorified the Qing dynasty and burned everything that was critical of the Qings or favorable to the Mings. At least 2,320 books, we estimate, went up in flames, and they were very important books for the Chinese cultural heritage. The communist regime in Czechoslovakia exploited that country's libraries in exactly the same way. In 1954, it ordered all local librarians to cleanse their shelves, to purge their shelves of any works that fit into categories that ranged from the expected, fascism, pornography, to the bizarre, formalism, ruralism, and snobbery. They got rid of 7,500 works. And that was little compared with the 24 million books destroyed in Soviet libraries during Stalin's Great Terror of 1938 to 39. So what I'm trying to say is the history of libraries has a dark side. It can slip downward, and that in the United States as well as in other countries. The great African-American author Richard Wright was not permitted to borrow books from the public library in his native Memphis, Tennessee, when he was a young man because the color of his skin was black. The only way he could take books out was by pretending he was a servant of a white man. Now, to be sure, the oldest libraries contributed greatly to civilization by building. The oldest universities did this by collecting books, preserving books. They go back to the Middle Ages, and we are grateful for them. I think Trinity was one of them. You've got a great collection. So this is all to the good, I agree. But most of these libraries were kept behind locked doors and thick walls, which removed them from outsiders. When I was a student at Oxford, the massive gate of my college slammed shut at 10 o'clock at night. If you were outside, too bad for you. You had to climb the walls, and the walls were 10 to 15 feet high. On top there were spikes and shards of glass. It was a daunting thing. But, of course, we students had a few paths in. And here I'm posing with a friend of mine in 1961. The idea was to climb in between two rows of spikes. I'm holding on to a revolving row, and you had to slip between that and the spikes above. Not an easy thing to do. As an accompaniment to the rest of my remarks, I will flash more pictures of Oxford's walls, which keep its libraries safe within its colleges. Here you see the Bodleian library or university library, lots of spikes, crenellations in the background. You get the impression of a medieval fortress keeping outsiders outside. So I've got a little collection of what it feels like for people who do not belong to the intellectual elite allowed inside the walls, and of the walls themselves. I'm sure many of you have wandered around Oxford and you see these extraordinary walls with very impressive spikes everywhere. Well, I could go on and on. But what I actually would like to discuss are the invisible barriers to the knowledge stored in research libraries. Libraries frequently do keep outsiders outside by all sorts of measures: restricted qualifications for entry, payment to obtain a reader's card, restrictive barriers of all kinds, including an atmosphere of intimidation. Ordinary folk hesitate to brave these barriers. They're kept really at a distance by a learned elite who wear an air of effortless superiority, which I think corresponds to the process of social sifting that the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu identified as distinction. Now, these are the downsides which I've been emphasizing because I think people don't appreciate sometimes how fragile civilization is. But of course, there's the upside, and this counter tendency, which I would call progressive, gathered force, especially in the age of enlightenment, when philosophers like Condorcet understood the diffusion of knowledge to be the most important force in history, one that would extend everywhere, destroying prejudice and promoting progress. That faith was shared by the founding fathers of the United States, notably the friend of Condorcet, Thomas Jefferson, who declared, quote, "The field of knowledge is the common property of mankind," end quote. So as the fathers understood it, the health of the republic depended on a well-informed citizenry, and the spread of light was commensurate with the reading of books. Now, in retrospect, that looks utopian, even naive. But it did help inspire the opening up of libraries. Ordinary readers were allowed inside the French Royal Library in 1692, in the British Museum in 1759. In the United States, the first large public library, the Public Library of Boston, opened in 1848. It allowed citizens to take books home, not just to read them inside the library. And the New York Public Library opened in 1911. There was a huge combination of three great collections, and the magnificent building, many of you have seen it, at the heart of New York. It's this, in a way, the symbol of New York, but the point is that anyone at all could just walk in without even a reader's card and ask to read a book. So immigrants walked in almost directly from the ships and read books in their native languages. The New York Public Library became a kind of open university which educated generations and generations of immigrants. But this kind of access to knowledge depended on a limited technology, the printing press. Most people in the 18th century could not read, and most of those who could read could not afford to buy books. Today, we have the internet. We now have it in our power to realize what was a utopian vision in the age of enlightenment. As an example of what can be accomplished, consider the difference between two great encyclopedias. But first, a reminder of all these walls and all the barriers to knowledge. The Encyclopédie, edited by Diderot, was the Bible of the Enlightenment and a marvel of intellectual production 250 years ago. 17 folio volumes of text produced by about 200 contributors. But it cost 980 livres, the equivalent of 2.5 years' income for a common laborer. Today, Wikipedia contains 30 million articles by 77,000 active, as they're called, contributors, and it reaches 365 million readers free of charge. A new ideal of openness is transforming the world of knowledge. Its origins go back to the Enlightenment ideal of a republic of letters, which is, in principle, a free intellectual realm with no police force, no boundaries, no exclusiveness. But in practice, only a tiny elite enjoyed citizenship in this republic during the 18th century. Today, we have open universities, open source software, open metadata, open access journals, and the beginnings of an open information highway. So things are looking up, but there is, of course, a downside. Because in some ways, access to knowledge is being closed. What I ask you is the cost of an average subscription to a chemical journal today. Answer, $4,044 US a year. What was it in 1970? $33 a year. Inflation accounts for only a small part of the increase. During the last 25 years, the price of academic periodicals went up at 4 times the rate of inflation. 1 year's subscription, it's my favorite example, and I'm sure you all read this regularly, the Journal of Comparative Neurology, costs $30,860 for 1 year's subscription. That's the equivalent of 600 monographs. 3 giant publishers, Reed Elsevier, Wiley, Blackwell, and Springer, now publish 42% of all academic articles, and they make giant profits from them. In 2014, Elsevier turned a 39% profit on an income of £2.1 billion sterling, and that just from its science, technology, and medical journals. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not claiming that this ruinous increase in journal prices can be explained by greed on the part of publishers. They are doing their job, returning the largest possible profit to their shareholders. So perhaps they should be congratulated for doing it so well. But their success should, I think, give us pause, because it illustrates the negative counterpart to the trend toward openness that I was just celebrating, namely commercialization, a trend toward closing access to knowledge. The output of articles in medical science doubles every 3 to 4 years. So yes, more knowledge is constantly being produced, but an increasingly small proportion of it is available to the public. Why? Libraries can no longer afford to pay the prices. The average price for a medical journal was $12 in 1970. It's now $1,470. All over the United States, maybe not Ireland, libraries are simply canceling subscriptions to academic journals because they are caught between decreasing budgets and increasing costs. The logic of the bottom line is inescapable. But there is a higher logic that deserves consideration, and I think your Vice Provost just mentioned it. the public good, and this principle that the public should have access to knowledge produced with public funds. The U.S. Congress acted on that principle in 2008 when it required that articles based on grants from the National Institutes of Health be made available from an open access repository, PubMed Central. But lobbyists for the publishers blunted that requirement by getting the NIH to accept a 12-month embargo to prevent public accessibility long enough for them to cream off the demand. And not content with that victory, the lobbyists tried to abolish the NIH mandate in something called the Research Works Act, a bill introduced in Congress in November 2011 and championed by Elsevier. The bill was withdrawn 4 months later following a wave of public protest. The word really spread, especially among young computer types who saw this as an absolute disaster. But that was 2011, and the lobbyists are still at work trying to block something called the Fair Access to Science and Technology Research Act, known as FASTR, F-A-S-T-R, which would give the public free access to the publication of all research funded by federal agencies with research budgets of $100 million or more. Will this act make it through Congress? Not likely. The battles over journal prices illustrate a conflict between two tendencies that I believe will determine the digital future: democratization versus commercialization. Now, I don't mean to reduce a complex situation to a simplistic formula. We have to find some way in a real world of wealth and power to find an equitable balance between private interests and the public good. We therefore face a fundamental question: have we got the balance right in the world of books and libraries? Consider Google. In 2004, Google set out to digitize the collections of the greatest research libraries in the United States. It intended to use the data in a search service, which would make available snippets or short passages from the books for users seeking information about a specific subject. And this sounded great. They came to Harvard first. We said, yes, we'll let you digitize our books that have been built up in collections since 1638. I mean, think of the effort and the expense. And Google was talking to us as if we were lucky that Google would digitize our books. Anyhow, we said, yes, you can do it, and they started digitizing. But the idea was to have a search service. Then they went not just to Harvard, they came to Harvard and they said, and by the way, we'd like to digitize the books you have that are covered by copyright. We said, hell no. We were not about to infringe copyright, but Google then went to the University of Michigan, to Stanford, to California, and was permitted to digitize on a very large scale copyrighted books. So it was instantly sued by the Authors Guild and the Association of American Publishers for infringement of copyright, and for 4.5 years, Google and the plaintiffs disappeared into secret negotiations. Actually, I sat in on some of the negotiations because they wanted Harvard to more or less approve something that was emerging as a settlement. But the more I saw, the worse it looked. And in the end, this document called The Settlement, produced by Google's lawyers, transformed a search service into a commercial library, so that we, the libraries, were to be asked to buy back our own books in digital form at a price to be set by Google, which could spiral out of control just as the prices of periodicals had done. It did not seem, at least to me, to be a good idea. We had polemics, there was a big debate, and then the settlement had to be cleared by a federal court in New York, which said, this is a violation of the Anti-Sherman Trust Act. It was a monopoly, and the court said no. So this project called Google Book Search is dead. Dead as a, I don't know, dead as a, what is the metaphor? Yes, okay. It's not going to happen at all. However, even before Google was proposing this monopoly, a monopoly of a new kind, a monopoly of access to knowledge in digital form, we began trying to develop a counter-proposal. But you see what the danger was. Google would have privatized a vast stretch of the public domain and collected a toll from anyone who tried to enter this fenced-off territory. So it was deeply commercial, but a deeply audacious project. And the idea was to try to produce some kind of alternative to it. And that was open access, of course. In the era of print, this open access tradition goes back to the founding of the Boston Public Library in 1848. As you see, the inscription carved over its main entrance says, "Free to all." Free to all. Now that we have entered the digital age, we can do better than what was done in the age of only print. We can make all of the material in all of our research libraries available to all citizens. That is the basic idea behind the Digital Public Library of America. What you see here is an artist at work as we began founding the DPLA, as we call it for short. So we had big meetings, hundreds of people, and as people made suggestions and we had an open debate, the artists sketched ideas on a large bulletin board that gives you some kind of visual representation of how this discussion took place and what some of the ideas were. On October 1st, 2010, long before Google Book Search was declared illegal by the court, a group of leaders from foundations, libraries, and computer science met at Harvard to discuss the possibility of creating a digital public library of America. The foundations would combine forces to provide the funds, the libraries would cooperate to provide the books. We created a steering committee, a secretariat with a small staff, and work groups scattered all across the country. Thousands of people participated, and everything was discussed openly in large meetings, which we held in San Francisco, in Chicago, and in Washington. But also, not just in these meetings that produced this illustration, of course, through the internet, through email, listservs, websites, wikis, and blogs. There was streaming and tweeting and texting, a running debate about every aspect of the plans in which everyone had a chance to be heard. And at the same time, there was enough coordination from the Berkman Center at Harvard for the DPLA to be launched successfully on April 18, 2013. Now that the DPLA has celebrated its third anniversary, its collections include over 13 million books and other objects, 5 times the amount that it had when it went online at first, and they come from nearly 2,000 institutions located in all 50 states. They are being very widely used. Millions of visitors have consulted the DPLA's website, dp.org, You're free to consult it anytime you like. And these readers come from every country in the world except 3. North Korea, Chad, and Western Sahara. The DPLA's collections include material in 500 languages. By clicking on the website, and this is one version of the website shortly after the launch, you can call up the text of books, of course, but you can do much more. You can browse through all of the collections by place. So you click on a place, you get the relevant material, and also by time period. So you might want to investigate times, and the bar graph shows you what is available. You can also wander through virtual exhibitions. They are particularly popular in secondary schools. They really work pedagogically. And, of course, you can make all sorts of apps which are constantly being grafted onto the system by independent innovators, people who are not at all part of the administration of the DPLA. So how should you envisage the DPLA? Not as a grand edifice with an imposing dome erected over a gigantic database, but rather as a distributed system, that is, a horizontal network that links up digital collections in libraries, archives, and museums in such a manner that users can get access to a document with one click on an electronic device. Now incorporated as a not-for-profit enterprise, the DPLA has headquarters with a small staff in Boston, but it is not a top-down organization. Its horizontality corresponds to its democratic spirit and its basic goal, namely to make the cultural heritage of America available free of charge to all Americans and to everyone in the world. So I'll have to move fast, but just to give you some idea of how it's organized and how it operates. Far from intending to serve an exclusive audience, such as the elite who have access to university libraries, the DPLA is designed to meet the needs of many different kinds of publics, students of all ages, seniors in homes for the elderly, researchers who have no institutional affiliation, and readers of every kind, including those who merely want to deepen their enjoyment of literature. The DPLA is organized in what we call hubs that extend its services like spokes of a wheel. We have content hubs such as Harvard, the Smithsonian Institution, and the New York Public Library, which provide digitized material from their enormous collections. And we also have service hubs, which aggregate other collections and develop networks at the state level. So far, they exist in 25 states, and we hope soon that they will exist in every state in the Union. The service hubs make special efforts to reach people in small communities working with local public libraries. The libraries invite everyone in a town or an urban neighborhood to bring in diaries, letters, family photographs, and other items stored in attics or trunks. The material is digitized, supplied with metadata, curated, and preserved. In this way, communities sharpen their awareness of their own culture and history, and at the same time, their local collections are integrated in a national network which grows organically day by day. A new program has just been funded to develop community-based digital repositories and advanced software for the back end or connective tissue that unites the system. Now, of course, the DPLA cannot reach every town in the United States. It relies on volunteers, what we call community reps. There's a small army of them who stimulate this kind of activity, digitizing, providing metadata, etc., in communities. We now have 600 community reps scattered through all 50 states, and the DPLA is developing a program to train librarians in public libraries to acquire the special skills that will be needed to launch digital projects in their communities, aside from the basic skill, which your Vice Provost mentioned, to guide people through the jungle that is cyberspace. Here is an example of material available to users who are interested in small-town life in one state, Minnesota, or maybe are interested in agriculture and agronomy. You click on the site and you get deeper and deeper into collections. They are simply amazing in just one state of the Union. Many of these services, of course, are aimed at schools. The DPLA recently formed a partnership with a public broadcasting system to provide specially designed and curated materials to teachers and students. It also makes available 100 course sets, as we call them. They're collections of primary source materials designed to be used in classrooms at the K through 12 level. They've been adopted everywhere in the country. So the DPLA is, we didn't mean this at the beginning, but it's now become a very powerful pedagogical force in the United States. In another program, which was announced by President Obama last year, the DPLA is cooperating with publishing houses, the 5 big publishing houses in New York, very serious commercial organizations, cooperating to provide free e-books to children in low-income families. So this mission to take information to schools and to the poorer elements is getting somewhere. Now, of course, all these new programs depend on the most advanced technology, and we've had several iterations of the technology. We have a terrific team of computer experts. I won't attempt to describe the DPLA's technological infrastructure, but I should emphasize that it too was a volunteer effort conducted on a national scale. For 2.5 years, 1,100 computer scientists submitted ideas which were combined and integrated by a team of experts in the Berkman Center at Harvard. And when the system went live online, it functioned flawlessly. It's interoperable with Europeana, which many of you probably know. It's a system that is Europeana to integrate digital collections within the European Union. The DPLA has special appeal because of its API, its application programming interface. That is the top of these 3 yellowish bars in the schematic representation of what its structure is. We've been surprised, actually, at the enormous use of the API by people who simply have good ideas and want to graft them onto the system. It provides a way for anyone to develop a particular tool or collection, which then can be used by everyone who clicks into the system. My favorite tool is called Bookshelf. It creates the possibility of digital browsing. So imagine those blue spines of books as being horizontal, and this is a way to have electronic serendipity. You know what happens if you actually go into the book stacks yourself. You look for a particular book, but then you sample the books that are lined up next to it. Well, we can do this now electronically and do it much more effectively than in the old physical way of browsing. But we have lots of special apps. Here are some just examples that were developed independently by DPLA users. A montage of images of guitars, so this is a kind of visual app, or maps of Chicago, which make it possible to study urban space on a macro and a micro level. In these and other outreach projects, the DPLA hopes to engage with its readers. Instead of simply making material available and then waiting for them to stand up and use it, it seeks to interact with them and to enlist them in shaping its growth. Now, of course, the DPLA faces plenty of problems. Having depended on support from foundations since 2010, it needs to develop, of course, a long-term business plan. Its technology requires constant maintenance and improvement, and as it increases in size and scope, it must resolve issues of governance and administration. But the biggest problem of all, I'll just mention it and then invite questions, strange as it may seem, is legal. The DPLA must respect copyright, but copyright now covers, as you know, books since for the life of the author plus 70 years, which means in most cases for more than a century. Everything after 1964 and almost every book published after 1923 is therefore excluded from the DPLA's collection. So most 20th century literature can't be made available. Why? Because we have, I think, these absurd laws of copyright. Now, there may be ways around this difficulty, not by changing copyright law, which is a vast, I think, impossible international endeavor. Some of you might think I'm wrong to say anything bad about copyright. That's another whole subject. But in the U.S., we have something called fair use. It derives from Clause 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. There's a huge debate, especially among law school professors, about fair use, but it's a debate that is, of course, spilled into the courts. And now we have a growing body of case law which is opening wider uses that are permissible, especially in universities and schools. So that's one hope. Another is the possibility of what are called extended collective licensing agreements, which have been developed in Scandinavia and which I find simply remarkable. Today, in Norway, every Norwegian can read every single book ever published, ever produced in the Norwegian language. It's a complex system, but it works. So maybe we could develop something like that. Maybe you could in Ireland. For the moment, however, the DPLA is also hoping that authors will voluntarily turn over the use of their copyrights to the DPLA and other open access organizations. Authors in general derive little income from a book a year or two after its publication. If you take subjects such as light fiction, a book is dead on the market within weeks. I mean, talk with publishers, and they will tell you, we shoot in the dark, and most books just don't make it. They don't even make it into bookstores. People don't even know about them. So if you're probably academic authors, most of you, but writers actually make almost nothing from their books, with a few famous exceptions. But those few are what? A percentage of a tiny percentage of a percentage of the authors. So most authors actually don't make money from their books, or make a little bit at first, and then the book lies more or less dead on a shelf with very, very few readers reaching it. What does an author want? I'm speaking to many of you who are authors. After the commercial life of his or her book has been exhausted, you want readers. So we've created something called the Authors Alliance, which is trying to organize authors to give over the use of their copyrights so that their books will circulate freely within the vast system, which is the DPLA. And so far, the response is encouraging. We're just launching this now, and it may sound naive, but I think it's possible for the DPLA to satisfy authors and readers alike by bringing them together digitally. Despite the pressure of commercialization, therefore, the DPLA has tapped a vein of public spirit that is both idealistic and pragmatic. It draws inspiration from the Age of Enlightenment, but it is designed to serve the needs of the 21st century. And at a time of disgust at the dysfunction of Washington, it has proved that it can get things done by independent initiative. You should not think of the DPLA as a digital version of the Library of Congress. It is a new kind of library altogether, not just in its technology, but also in its organization and its spirit. It will operate simultaneously on many levels: personal, local, national, and international. It is already functioning successfully, and it will continue to acquire new functions with ever-expanding collections for many generations. Technology will also continue to change, of course, and the DPLA will have to change with the technology far into the future. But if we can get it right now, we can help shape that future. For the first time in history, we can make the cultural heritage of humanity available to all human beings. We have the technology, the know-how, the resources, and the will. We have taken the first steps, and now we have to get the job done. Thank you.